Over the last year, my number one priority in the gym has been to grow my arms, and I've been super successful in doing that. I've grown them about an inch actually in less than a year. And in this video, I wanted to share exactly what I did to do that, the exact workouts, the exact training philosophy, the sets, the reps, all that good stuff. And so this is going to be an educational lifting video. Hi, I'm Ben. If you're new here, I make educational lifting videos. And this is kind of the outline of this video. So you'll notice that all these things, you can just read them right here. I don't have to say them. All of them are going to have timestamps. So if you want to just go right to the section that you are interested in here, go right to the section. If you want to get the most out of this video, definitely watch the whole thing. But if you even just want to skip right to the end of it, I'll show you exactly where you can download my exact training program for free. Okay, so you can just click there. All right, anyway, so to start with training philosophy, I think this is an important place to start so that you all can kind of know where exactly I'm coming from in terms of how I've gotten to this point. I feel like a lot of people give their recommendations, and that's great, but they often don't talk about the process of how they arrived at that point, which I think is really useful because, you know, my goals with this channel is to provide education to you all. It's not just to tell you like, hey, this is what I did, you should go do it. It's to sort of give you the tools to figure it out for yourself, because that's, I think, how people end up making their own best version of themselves in the gym, is if they figure the shit out for themselves, okay? So my training philosophy overview as a starting point, I think all different kinds of things work. So you see people argue and bicker about, oh, high volume versus low volume. I think both of these things are chill. Whether or not you prefer this dude right here or this chick or duck, I think it's like a baby chick or whatever, right? Both of these things are cool with me. But in terms of like how I think about training, I actually think about training and specifically volume after I think about something else, which is that I think about effort first. And the reason I think about effort, and really what I mean by effort, is like how close to failure do you train? Do you train at failure? Do you not train to failure? The reason I think about effort first, and in particular training with high effort, is because I like to keep things super simple. I like to keep things really predictable, just in the sense of like I'm doing the same things every workout. I like to standardize as much as I can because I think making changes is much easier that way. And when I say high effort, and like what does that mean? Well, it means that every set I do is to failure, and more specifically, this means that I do every set in the gym of all my exercises, minus just a few, until I literally can't move out of the stretch position. So you'll see like the exercise demonstrations later and what that will actually look like, but that is how I like to train. This is why I'm specifying it as my philosophy. I like to do it this way because I don't need to make guesses about, oh, how many reps in reserve did I have? And also it just keeps things simpler. I almost don't even need to keep track of like how many reps I'm doing. I just go until I can't go. I record the reps after if I'm going to track them at all. And yeah, that's how I like to train. So I start from that point and then work toward, okay, how much volume does it feel like I might need? I'm gonna take a guess at that and just see what happens over the next few months. That's my programming training philosophy. You make your best guess based on your preferences, you do that for a while, and then you observe the outcome. That's the scientific method kind of in a nutshell. So initially I started with about 6 total sets for both biceps and triceps per week. So I'm talking about 6 for biceps, okay, that's one thing, and then 6 for triceps. We'll talk about the brachialis, brachioradialis stuff a little bit later when I go over the program and the exercise demos and stuff. And eventually, so that's where I started with this program, again, close to a year ago. I had never done like isolated arm days before. And so I basically made 2 isolated arm days, as we'll go over, and I started with just, as you'll see in the layout, 6 total sets per week. And then from there, and over the course of the last year, I have arrived at a point where 8 to 10-ish sets per week for biceps and triceps each is where I've landed. Again, all these sets are to failure. So some of you may think, based on your training experience, philosophy, and preferences, that this is low volume. Some of you may think this is high volume. I don't give a fuck what you call it. It's just what it is, and it's what has worked for me, okay? And then some more context is that I've split this into 2 days per week, but I think I mentioned that, okay? So the last thing I'll say before I move on to some biceps, triceps training theory is that how I've got here is individual, but, it'll probably work for, and I put work in quotations because that's a complicated word, for most of you if you apply the following well. And so what I'm really trying to say with that is that people often stop at like, oh, I'm an individual, I'm a special snowflake. Yes, absolutely true to some degree. but also like if you train hard, you do it for like moderate-ish volume relative to how people normally talk about volume, like, and you do exactly what I'm going to tell you to do here, I would find it very difficult to believe that you will not make progress in growing your arms as long as you can sustain the program, okay? So in terms of biceps, triceps training theory might be the wrong word, philosophy, I want to just talk about some nuances in terms of like how I think about setting up each training day, why I'm doing the exercise I'm doing, and what the rationale is behind it. And to discuss that, we need to discuss kind of two major things. We need to discuss anatomy to some extent, and we need to discuss some physics stuff, okay? So when we think about biceps and triceps training overall, okay, I kind of lump biceps and triceps training into several categories, okay? Because we can have our arms in different positions, we can use different types of resistance, and the two main categories, the two main variables that we really need to think about toggling, number one is shoulder position, i.e. are our arms overhead, are they at our side, are they somewhere in between? And number two, where it's heaviest. So where it's heaviest relates to resistance. You can think about that as just where things are most challenging. All right, so the first thing I want to just discuss is shoulder position. So in terms of the triceps, we have different options. We can do a kind of arms at the side thing on the left here, or an arms overhead thing, or an arms kind of somewhere in between. And these positions stretch the triceps differently. And in particular, the long head of the triceps stretches more when the arm is overhead, stretches less when the arms are at the side. And the rationale behind using different arm positions, you could get into the nitty-gritty of like, oh, is this muscle biased slightly more? Is this, the way that I think about it is just, it's for the same reason that variability in anything can be net positive. Variability in exercise selection can be positive because different exercises, they stress the body in slightly different ways. I'm not going to veer too far off of the path here because I want to be focused with this video, but these two triceps extensions are different for different reasons, and so I include both of them because I think they're complementary. And the same is true for biceps, right? So you could do a curl with your arm at your side here, like a standing dumbbell curl, or you could do a curl with your arm in front of your body, like in a preacher curl, right? It could be overhead, but a preacher curl is kind of most of the way there. So you kind of get the picture. And we end up with these two main buckets. We end up with biceps and triceps. Our arms are pretty much in the same positions, just kind of with different types of resistance and resistance directions. And in one sort of bucket, we have arm at side bucket. And in another bucket, we have arm not at side bucket. Okay, so arm not at side doesn't necessarily need to be overhead, but as I mentioned, arm not at side and arm at side. So these are the two buckets that I have for biceps and triceps training. And then once we kind of have that figured out in terms of like, okay, well, I want to be using different exercises for each of these different positions, we also have to consider where resistance is highest, i.e. where is there a most amount of resistance, of the most amount of torque within each of these exercises. I think of these two variables, this number 2 bit is probably more consequential, more important, in particular for elbow-related health, because I think that, as we'll see, stressing different portions of the range of motion is going to be the thing in terms of variability that leads people to be able to make sustained progress. Okay, so let me tell you what I mean by that. So shout out to the channel E3 Rehab, that's where I got this photo. And right here, we're looking at 2 elbow angles, flexion, and full extension for this individual. Now I'm gonna replace those words with bent and straight, okay? When we talk about, say, biceps, okay, so imagine we're doing a curl. We could do a curl such that the top, the bent position is easy, and so that the bottom position is hard. This would be like a super like stretch focused, like imagine your arm is here and you're holding a dumbbell and you have a support here, right? That would be like a super stretch focused curl. So you could make it hard in the bottom and easy in the top, or you could do the inverse. You can make it hard at the top where the top is really one of those squeeze focused things where the bottom is much easier, right? So you see this contrast of hard and easy, easy and hard in different elbow positions. So we'll go over, of course, examples of these exercises in a little while here, but that's really important to understand, okay? And then now imagine as triceps, all that happens is things get flipped. So now this is the stretch position when your elbow is bent, and this is the straight position, or sorry, this is the shortened position. So if we go back here, I'm talking about this in the context of a curl. Like when your arm is bent, that's the squeeze position. When your arm is straight, that's the stretch. So I'm not talking just about muscle lengths here. This conversation can get kind of confusing. I'm talking about both the muscle length kind of implicitly, but more so where you can make it hard and easy. So when you're doing a curl, the shortest position is the elbow bend position. But when you're doing a triceps extension, it's the opposite. Okay, so most of you probably know that, but I just want to make that clear. Now, when you're doing a triceps extension, you can make the bent position easy, and you can make the squeeze position hard, just like we talked about in the curl, and then inversely, you could flip it, right? So you could do a really stretch-focused tricep thing, which would be this kind of thing over here, making it really heavy in the stretch position, and then you could make it super easy in the squeeze position, right? So we have these two sort of different variables to play around with. Number one is shoulder position. Number two is kind of where it's hardest or where it's heaviest. And when we think about structuring an arm day in terms of how we can organize an arm day, I basically will utilize these different variables to create different exercises so that each of them end up complementary to the other. And I think that's how sustainability and long-term progress is ultimately created, okay, for all muscle groups to some extent. Okay, so with that said, if that's confusing right now in terms of the variables, don't worry about it. I'm gonna make it super simple with talking about a sample arm day, okay? So we have 5 exercises per arm day. This is how I structure it. We have, for biceps, 2 different kinds of curls. We have one which is a bent focus and one which is a elbow straight focus. And then for triceps, we also have 2 different kinds of extensions. We have one which is a bent focus and one which is a straight focus. Now you might be thinking, Ben, what is the 5th magical exercise? Well, that is some kind of hammer curl, right? So I mentioned earlier, if you've been watching this thing all the way through, that I like to also include brachialis and brachioradialis training. I only think 1 hammer curl per session is necessary in my case, just because the hammer curling muscles, although the biceps are included in that, the brachialis and the brachioradialis, those other elbow bender muscles, they do not get a lot of love with normal supinated curls, but they still get some, or they still get some quote unquote indirect stimulus in my opinion. So I just do 1 hammer curl to make sure I'm on top of that. We don't need a kind of equivalent for triceps because the triceps are the only muscle on the backside of the upper arm that's straight in the elbow, minus this one little guy called the anconeus, which is kind of irrelevant and also just gets trained with triceps movements. Anyway, okay, so when we talk about sets and reps and how we're organizing things, everything that I do pretty much, and you'll see the exercise selection how I lay it out, is 2 or 3 sets. For the most part, it's 2 sets. Again, some of you might think, wow, that is so low, that's such a low amount of set. Oh my God. When you see the way that I do the exercises, you will recognize, okay, a set is not a set. A set depends, or really the quality of a set depends on how hard you do the set. So 2 sets of what I do, 2 sets to complete failure, might be more stimulative than someone who's literally doing 3 times the volume, whose sets just basically look like warm-up sets. So you'll see what that looks like in a little bit. As I mentioned, everything I like to do is to failure, and everything that I like to do is between 5 and 15 reps. Again, to some degree, these are all personal preferences. I would say the 5 to 15 reps thing is pretty much a universal situation in terms of like, you know, on average, people kind of end up using this rep range, but on average, a lot of people are not training to failure for a variety of reasons. So anyway, that's kind of the basic layout. And in terms of progression and stuff, when you all download the free program, you will get the exact progression scheme that I like to use. So I won't get super in-depth into that now. Okay, so one thing to keep in mind is that as I mentioned, I do this twice a week. So my days that I like to do them on are Tuesday and Friday. I train 5 days a week. The other 2 days I have a full upper day, and then I have 1 leg day per week. So I train 5 days, and 2 of them are focused on arms. And you can structure that with any pair that you want, of course. I personally prefer there to be, between days to, there's going to be a cycle of like, so Tuesday I have Wednesday and Thursday to recover, and then I can do Friday, and then from Friday to Tuesday I have 3 days. So it's going to be a 2-3 split some way or the other. You could do Monday, Thursday, you could do Wednesday, Saturday, et cetera, et cetera. All right, so now we are moving on to exercise analysis. And with this, I want to go over just one example of each kind of motion. I mentioned the different kinds of curls, the bent focus, the straight focus, and the kinds of extensions, and I want to give examples of that now. So here's the first kind of curl. This is a more elbow straight focus. Now, I use the term elbow straight focus a little bit loosely because I don't mean that there's only challenge in the elbow straight position, but I kind of categorize these things based off of where I fail in the motion. So I'm gonna kind of let this play. Okay, this is a preacher curl, obviously. I like to keep my elbows slightly bent in the bottom position. I just kind of like how that feels to keep the tension. You could absolutely straighten your elbow if you want, but I just prefer this. This, by the way, is a 50-pound dumbbell, so I've worked up to 50s on this, literally just using this method over the last year. I think maybe eventually, about a year ago, I maybe started with like 35s or 40s for like 10 or 15 reps, and I hit this for 7 the other day, or 8. So I was super happy with that. Watch what happens where I fail. Okay, so you see I get to that last rep, and this is really how the categorization, if that word is a word, makes sense to me, is On this last rep, I get to the more elbow straight position, and I can't budge, okay? So curl number one, this is probably my favorite kind of curl, this or a machine preacher curl, I just love these. Category one is the elbow straight focus. You will know if you are doing this elbow straight focus thing, if you are using an angle that does not allow you to get out of the bottom position when you fail. Because as we'll see in a different kind of variation, failure will look different. So this is what failure looks like with the elbow straight focus for curls. That is category one. Now I will move to elbow straight focus for the triceps extension just because it's kind of a mirror, and you'll see how different this failure point is. So this is an example of elbow straight focus. I chose the arm at side position, by the way, just to mention it. This is categorized, technically speaking, as the arm not at side position, right? Because when we look at the angle here between my arm and my trunk, my arm is up in front of my body. So this is elbow or not at side position, or arm not at side. And then when we look at this one, this is arm at side triceps, okay? So I'll just skip forward here. And I want you all to notice kind of the way in which this failure occurs. So when it's an elbow straight focus for the triceps, what you'll notice is I'm getting these full range, quote unquote, full range reps where I'm getting all the way to the bottom. I'm really emphasizing the squeeze position. And so when I get to the bottom, it's really, really hard there, and I'm really emphasizing it. But as I start to get deeper and deeper and deeper into fatigue, you see my elbow is not going to be able to fully straighten more. And then it's going to be able to straighten less and less and less and less. And I'm trying to get to the bottom, but I can't. My triceps just won't let me. They're too fatigued. And eventually, I just end up banging out a bunch of partials. So this is an example of an elbow straight focus exercise where I start the set out where my elbows are getting all the way fully straight. I'm squeezing maximally. But then as failure starts to occur, as fatigue starts to set in, it's not like all of a sudden like that first curl variation we were looking at. It's not like all of a sudden the motion just stops. I get a bunch of partial reps. So failure looks different in different exercises. So for the elbow straight focus tricep stuff, you will notice you fail in the squeeze position and then you can bang out all these partials. I just bang out all the partials and I go until I can't. But for the arm not at side biceps, right? Again, there's no like partial reps happening here. I just don't move out of the bottom. So again, point of emphasis, failure looks different. When you have an elbow straight focus for the biceps, this is kind of what it will look like. And when you have an elbow straight focus for the triceps, this is kind of what it will look like, okay? So this, if I had to say it a different way, this biceps curl is more of a lengthened focus, okay, in terms of where the resistance is hard. And then this is kind of more of a squeeze focus in terms of where the resistance is hard. So if we move on to the biceps equivalent of the squeeze focus, right? Again, not talking about muscle length, I'm just talking about where the challenge is. This is one of my go-tos for the elbow bent focus. So you'll notice a kind of similar thing to the rope extension where my arms are at my sides or slightly behind my body because my torso is kind of tipped forward. And what you will notice is as I get into failure, you'll notice a very similar thing happening relative to the triceps extension we just looked at. Okay, so look, I can't get to the squeeze a little bit. Okay, so let's see. Now I'm just gonna get halfway up. Again, I'm really trying to get up, but I just can't. So I get all these partial reps now in the bottom, and then I stop. So again, unlike this first curl that we looked at, where when I got to the bottom of what was gonna be the last rep, I just basically couldn't move. So here's the second to last, super slow, super slow, super slow, super slow, but I can get all the way up. I get down to the bottom, just basically nothing. But with this biceps, I get toward deeper and into the set, into the fatigue, and I end up being able to do partials. So when you have an elbow bent focus for the biceps, you will get all of these partial reps. When you have an elbow straight focus for the biceps, you will not get the partial reps, you will just stop. For the triceps, when you have an elbow straight focus, you will get all those partial reps, but the final exercise template here, when you do the elbow bent focus for the triceps, you probably can guess that you will not be able to get all of those partial reps. This is an elbow bent focus because of the resistance, much like all these other exercises. So I want you all to watch what happens in this set. This will kind of mirror that preacher curl that we were just looking at with the dumbbell, where I'm going to squeak out, okay, a second to last rep here, and then I'm going to try to go for another one, and it just stops, right? So for biceps and triceps, everything is inverted. When I have the elbow bent focus for the triceps, as is true here, I can't get any partial reps, I just fail. But when I have the elbow bent focus for the biceps, I get the partials. Conversely, when I have the elbow straight focus for the biceps, I don't get any partials, but the elbow straight version for the triceps, I can get all those partials, right? So this is really about basically what range of motion is emphasized, and if this was confusing and kind of jumbled to you, just recognize that the reason I'm selecting these different exercises is so that different portions of the range are emphasized throughout a total set. So when you're looking at this triceps exercise right here, the portion of the range that is emphasized is the elbow straightened position, right? That's why I fail there first, and I can get all those partials. And so that's really important to have a squeeze focus to me, because then I go over here and I do a stretch focus thing where I literally am not even straightening my elbow fully, and I'm really just emphasizing the squeeze position. So different exercises, they emphasize different portions of the elbow bending range, and I have these squeeze and stretch focus things, these bent elbow, these straight elbow focus things, so that I can challenge different portions of the range, and so that no sort of structure, no connective tissue, no just anything in the elbow or the forearm or the wrist gets overly stressed over and over in the same session. You see so many different guys and girls who are just basically hammering the same exact motion with the same exact resistance over and over and over and over again, and then they're confused about why their inner elbow feels fucked up all the time. It's like, well, you're basically just beating the same thing with a hammer over and over and over again. Why would you expect anything else really to happen, right? You're just basically stressing the same exact thing over and over. You want to differentiate the stress at least enough so that the stress can be sort of different at different points in the range, different connective tissues get stressed differently. And not only is that great for just developing overall strength throughout a range, but it's also just as good because it leads to the sustainability. So anyway, the last motion that I'll do is some kind of hammer curl. This is a variation I love. It's basically just a rope curl. With this kind of curl, you really want to emphasize allowing the upper arms to move. So you'll see how it's almost like looks like a little bit of a row, but I'm pulling my arms to my chest. Of course, you can also do this with dumbbells, a million other hammer curl variations that you can do, but the ones that are more specific to the brachialis and brachioradialis are gonna be the ones where you're kind of performing like a row type motion. So this is kind of my go-to and has been for a while now. And yeah, it ends up being a squeeze focus, as you can see, if you're applying these same concepts, because I get to the end of like all the fatigue here, and you see I just can do a bunch of partials, right? If this were an elbow straight focus, I would not be able to get a lot of partials. In the free program that I'll link to you, of course, here in this video, as I mentioned, you'll get examples of different kinds of hammer curls that I used. All right, so now that we're talking about the free program and the instructions to find that and follow that, just click the link in the description of the pinned comment, number one. Number two, go to, so that will prompt you to join my free community. Once you're in the free community, go to the classroom section, then click on all free stuff, and what you will see down here is a section for YouTube resources. Under the YouTube resources, you will see the free program. You can download it, it's just a PDF right here. And then also included in that free resources section will be a bunch of different common questions I get about like progression and all that stuff and how to progress each exercise. So overall, I really hope that this was helpful to you. This has been how I've made a lot of progress in my arms. I think if you apply anything similar, it will work quite well. Again, as long as you can sort of find what works for you, find it sustainable, make it sustainable, and also just make sure that like you're not taking any of this as gospel. Do not like listen to everything I say and just assume that it is like exactly the way it needs to be for you. Maybe, you for the first couple weeks you do this, you only want to be doing the elbow bent focus stuff for the biceps or vice versa for the triceps, right? Play around with the concepts and the principles that I've talked about as if you want to, because I think that's probably best to supplement the learning process and in just your own journey. So anyway, I hope to see you all in the free community, perhaps even asking questions about the free program and maybe just posting videos of yourself in terms of exercises. And if you want me to review exercises, just post up videos in there. A lot of our community members do that and get good feedback from everyone. So anyway, I hope this was helpful. Again, sign up for that free community to get these resources, and I will hopefully see you there.